The government is in the business of promoting the well-being and to reduce the suffering of all of its subjects. Now, this is the fundamental relevance of the idea called the government. This idea is necessary because humanity decided to establish societies. If everybody was doing their own thing without identifying with any form of society, then there will be no need for a government. But since humans decided to come together to form streets, to form villages, to form towns and cities and states and nations and kingdoms, there arose a need for a government. Why? Because every single day, human beings, even though they are part of a society, have to tend to their own personal needs. And by doing this, the society itself is left unattended to. In that way, there is injustices, there is a rule of anarchy, there is disorder and chaos generally. And so there was a need to establish a system, to establish a structure, an institution that whilst every other person would be naturally doing whatever they are doing in their life, pursuing their own dreams and aspirations, taking care of their children and family, the government institution is there to ensure that every other person is taken care of, that the society is looked after and everything is going smoothly and securely. That is the idea of the government. That is why government started in the first place. Now, society has evolved, humanity has evolved, and we have, experienced different kinds of government structures. We have experienced different natures of government. At first, it was about the strong, ruling over the weak. This was the way. Like literally, it was the strong. You had to be physically strong to be a king of a nation. You had to be physically strong, or you had to have physically strong men around you to be a king or an emperor or something, because you needed to fight war to expand your dominion. And this is the way humanity began evolving. But after a certain point, some persons realized that it is not sustainable to always allow the strong people rule over the people. To always allow the strong ones rule over the society. Because strength is not an indication of good moral standing. Because a person is strong does not mean the person is good or bad. And because the person is strong does not determine the person's intellectual capacity or the person's will or the person's desires, or the person's priorities. Just because the person is strong does not mean the person doesn't make him a good person, doesn't make him a good leader. So a certain group of persons brought about the idea of democracy. This is the Greeks, especially the people of Athens. Athens is a Greek city-state that still exists today. Today it's a city, but initially it was a city-state. It was a kingdom inside a kingdom. That's how the Greeks fashioned their society. They had kingdoms inside kingdoms. So the Athenians, they chose democracy as a form of government. Now, what is democracy? It is the form of government where the people jointly come together to establish government based on what they think or what they assume is best for them. And now, follow me closely. You are liable to ask, is the government then a person? Is the government just a person? If you are thinking about the government of your state or of your nation, you typically start imagining maybe the president or the governor or the local executive person in your local government or something. But the government is not a person. The government is an institution. It's an establishment of the state. The government is just like any other establishment. Government is like a company, But unlike the average company, the government is not in the business of making profits per se. It's not about making profits for the government. The government is in the business, like I said earlier on, of promoting the well-being and reduce the suffering of all of its citizens. The government comes in many forms, alright? We have democracy, we have monarchy, we have oligarchy, and the rest. So the Athenians, they came with democracy to say, okay, let the majority rule. So what makes up the government? In our case, we have a government in our nation. But the truth is that the Nigerian people did not create this government. It was not the idea of the Nigerian people to establish the government. It was not even the idea of the Nigerian people to create the Nigeria in the first place. But we will come back to that later on. So what makes up the government? In our case, we have a system of government that is made up of the executives, which are the individuals who command the resources. The resources to do whatever is necessary. If they say, oh, today there is a road that is damaged in so and so place, it is the executive arm of the government, whether the president or the governor or the chairman, that have the resources to go in there and walk that road, replace that road, or to fix that road. That's just an instance, right? It is the executives who have the power to execute, to do something, to make things happen, because they control all the resources of the society. Now, they do whatever is necessary. That is executive. Now we have, after the executives, we have the legislature. Now, they are basically a group of persons representing the different partitions of society. These partitions are mostly known as political zones or constituencies. Now, these guys in the legislature, they represent and enforce the development and welfare of their respective constituencies and also the society at large. Now, in terms of making laws, setting up policies, recommending actions to be taken by the executives and every other aspect of the society, the Senate or the representatives make the legislature. The Senate and the representatives, they make up the legislature in our nation. It is the smallest unit of our national convention. See it like this. Every Nigerian, see it like this. If every Nigerian is to come together in a massive meeting and everybody is there to, enforce his or her own advantage and benefits and interests, that is what we'll call a national congress. Now, the legislature is a micro level of what you would call a national congress. If everybody in a society comes together, and spends time to discuss about the nation, to talk about how things are going to be done. And since it is very, very impractical to make that happen, you can't bring everybody in Nigeria together. So the easiest solution to that problem is to divide it into constituencies, and instead of bringing everybody, the constituency has to choose people that they deem worthy, people that they see fit to represent them in the Senate, or the House of Representatives, the Congress. Now, These people represent the different divisions of citizenry, and they ideally engage in the function mentioned earlier. They make laws which indicate a body of pronouncements. These laws are pronouncements. These laws are decisions that they make and legalize. You see, that holds all Nigerians together. They make these laws and enthrone them over all the citizens, because it is the collective good, and they are authorized to make these laws because of the powers of the people whom they represent. Naturally, your senator is just a man. He doesn't have any powers to do anything. But because of the process called elections, where every single member of any given constituency or any given society goes out there to vote, voting is more like saying, I stand with this one, I stand with this one. And since everybody has come out and taken their decision, taken their side, the person who has the most supporters is seen as the victor, seen as the winner. Therefore, by virtue of that election, that human being becomes a senator, becomes someone who represents that constituency or that national division. Now, where are we? Okay. Now we have the judiciary. The judiciary is charged with ensuring that the laws that are made by the legislature and the executives are followed and enforced upon every single Nigerian citizen. That is in our case, for the good of everyone as agreed upon in the houses of legislature. The judiciary has enforcement agencies like the courts, the armed forces, which involve the police, the soldiers, the army, the navy, the civil defense, and every other allied agency, the EFCC, the NDLEA, the ICPC, the Secret Service. All these people are under the judicial arm of government that are charged with enforcing the laws and policies and decisions of the other two arms of government. Alright? So these guys make up the government, the executives, the legislature, and the judiciary. They make up our government. When we say government, that is what the people will talk about. So whenever you think about government and you start having the images of Tinubu or your state governor in your head, then you are just seeing a very small part of the whole picture. Because these guys, they may be the executives, they may control the resources, but they are not the ones who make everything happen. Alright, before any budget is passed for any fiscal year for the government, it has to go through the legislature. That, in other words, the people have to see the budget, they have to scrutinize the budget, and they have to decide upon it and say, okay, let's use it or let's abandon it. Okay. The executive arm of government has the government and the governors and the presidents and their own executive councils, their ministers and their commissioners and their appointees, the permanent secretaries, the directors of different government agencies and the rest of them. But it is a more complex thing, really. The government is a very complex structure that involves not just one person, but a group of persons. So, these guys make up the governments with the law, or the constitution, because the constitution is the document that contains the law. All right, with the law, an arbitrary term that you should simply understand as a common good. The Constitution of Nigeria is just the common good of all Nigerians. The law of Nigeria is just the common good of Nigeria. So the law is not created to fight anybody, to fight any group of persons. Rather, the law is created to enhance the well-being and the progress and the security and safety of all Nigerians, from themselves and from every other person around, even their own fellow country people and their governments also. That is why we have the constitution. That's why we have the law, and it's the common good. Well, we'll come to that. Now, the common good chosen by the people who elect representatives to make decisions on their behalf. So while you may not be directly involved with making laws in the House of Reps or in the Senate, you have already given somebody that power to do it for you. So whether you like what they are doing there, or whether you don't like what they are doing there, whatever they decide in those halls will affect you, because you've already appended your signature, so they are being there in the first place. So whatever they decide to do there will affect you. So it's a common good, whether you like it or not. It's good for you, whether you like it or not. Let's go forward. That is why they say that democracy is the rulership of the people. Because even though we have three arms of government, we have as the ultimate, structure being the constitution, which the people make through their representatives. So the common good or the law is the real ruler in the land, and it is the people who determine the common good. Take note of the common good, because this common good thing, because it will come up later. Now, the government, the common good that the government is put in place by the state. We mentioned, I'm sorry, I kind of lost material there. We mentioned that the government is put in place by the state. But what then is the state? Who is the state? Can I visit the house of the state, or can I get his phone number? The answer is simply no. The state, just like the government, is not one person. Now, consider a place like Nigeria. Okay? We have landlords and tenants. In other words, those who own estates and those who use these estates. The landlords can do whatever they desire with their estate. They can choose to let it out, they can choose to paint it, they can choose to destroy it, to rebuild it, to sell it, they can do whatever they like. They can choose who stays there and who does not stay there. The tenant, on the other hand, only has powers that are limited to his immediate property. In other words, the only power you have in any estate is just that small space that you have as your own space, as your own property that you paid for, and also based on the terms of your tenancy. Because there are points where the landlord tells you, don't do this in the property, don't do that in the property, and you have to agree to that. Even though you own that property, even though you are in that space, you also have to follow the rules and regulations given by the landlord, or else you face eviction, right? So this is the structure in every part of the nation. We have people who own the land and people who inhabit the land, who stay in the land. Therefore, we have landlords and we have tenants. It's the same thing everywhere. In the south, in the north, in the east, in the west, in the central region, everywhere there are people who own the land, who own the estates, who own the houses, and the people who live there. Now, if this translates into the larger sense, you can now see the state as a self-autonomous, a self-governing part of every society. In other words, the landlord has his own government, his own property, has his own estate that can provide him with food, he can provide him with security, with his entertainment, he can provide anything he wants to do with it there. He can make his laws and break his laws, whatever he wants to do with his property, he does it. And you, with the tenant, you can only hope that you are able to come to some sort of agreement with the landlord to ensure that the things that he is doing or the things that he wants to do don't affect you too much or too badly. Now, in a village, for instance, the state will include the ancestral descendants of that place, and mostly the chiefs or the wealthy or the strong men of that village, who can individually take care of themselves, but for the purpose of society, for the purpose of let's come together and form a society, these autonomous individuals will also have to come together to institute a government. So in a traditional African context, the state will be the chiefs who come together to crown a king or the high chief. Now, normally the common people in the villages, they do not really know what's going on. They'll tell them that, oh, the high priest in respect with the gods and they have chosen the king and things like that. But we know it's politics, right? We have, in some parts of the nation, we have cultures where they have a kingmaker. The kingmaker doesn't become the king, but that lineage, that descendancy have the authority, have the power, ancestral power, to decide who becomes the king or who becomes the head of government in those places, in addition to having the support of the fellow leaders, and these leaders are not just anybody. These people are maybe the heads of families or the heads of clans or the heads of something or the other. But the normal everyday guy in the village doesn't have a say in the appointments of the kings or the chiefs or whatever. Right? Because although he is part of that society, he is not part of the state. Okay. Now this, for a republic, the citizens are all state. That is why everybody opted to start republics. That's why republics are everywhere in the world, because it made more sense that everybody, whether you are from there, whether you are not from there, whether you are a landlord or you are a tenant, in a republic everybody is supposedly equal. In a republic everybody is a citizen, and citizens have the same rights. Okay, so they are allowed to use their power to elect governments through these democratic processes. This seems fair in theory, where everybody is allowed to, vote and stuff. The democratic political system is the absolute best when you consider it theoretically. But in reality, it is complex. It is very, very complex, especially in this part of the world. Why so? Nigeria operates a mixed economic system. But we all know a mixed economic system like capitalism and socialism. The people, the capitalists run some parts, the government runs some parts. But we know that our nation is mostly run by capitalists. Who are capitalists? They are the people with the capital, people with the money, or people with the means of engaging into the productions of goods and services, or people with the ability to finance or to empower ventures, whether good or bad ventures. It doesn't matter. What matters is that capitalists have the ability to make them happen. Right. This means in a purely capitalist economy, for instance, America, the United States of America is a purely capitalist economy. A nation from where we borrowed all our government and political styles from. There are mostly two kinds of citizens: those who employ labor and those who are employed for labor. Now, the more laborers you are capable of employing, the bigger the money you are capable of making, and ultimately the greater your influence, the greater the influence you have in society, since everybody needs your money for their own sustenance. In a capitalist economy, you need capital to have food. You need capital to get a place to live in. You need capital to get clothing, medicine, to educate your children, and so on. You need capital to live life in this society, or at least you need the favor of someone with capital. Therefore, although all citizens are supposedly equal, everyone cannot will to the utmost their independence autonomy as citizens, since they have to work for another person or group of persons to earn a living. We know that average people are very, very, very loyal to their belly, alright, to their stomach. That's why they say interests. And in that case, you find that the wealthy are the true state. The wealthy are, by rights, the only autonomous people in society, in capitalist society, because it's only them who are able to live on their own without anybody else. It is the wealthy who are able to take care of themselves. The other class of persons do not have that kind of freedom. They need money in the capitalist system, so they have to go and work for someone who has money in order for them to live life. All right, so the wealthy are the real state, not the general population. So while they say everybody is equal in democracy, you have to rethink that particular idea. So since they not only have the ability to exercise their own individual rights, they also have the ability to influence others in their choices and actions. I'm talking about the wealthy people who are by right the state in any capitalist system. So in our case, the wealthy people of our society, who employ 80% of the population, make up the state, which gives power to the government. Yes, they make you believe that all citizens are equal, but in reality that is not true. Democracy needs numbers. All democracy needs is numbers, but it does not care as to the quality of those numbers. In other words, in a society of, let's say, 1 million people, to qualify for rulership in government, you need to have at least the support of, let's say, 501 persons. You need to have the majority people beside you, and that is all that matters in democracy. But it does not care if the people that are beside you are normal, if they have sense, if they have any sense of moral, if they have any moral principles, if they have virtue, if they even are responsible for their own life, for the life of the people they bring into this world, if they even care about the society. It doesn't really matter. What matters is the numbers. Okay? It doesn't care about the quality of these numbers. This is the reason why the United States, after some time, established an institution called the Electoral College. And these are a group of individuals who supposedly know better and whose votes ultimately determine the rulers of the land. The people can determine their local and regional authorities, but when it came to the general leader, such as the president, the Electoral College alone holds 30% of the total votes needed to win. But the funny thing is, in the United States of America, who are the Electoral College in the States of America? You cannot tell. You don't know who the Electoral College is. But we know the Electoral College is made up of the top elites. The top elites in the areas of education, the areas of business, and the areas of the military and the rest of that. The big boys, the ones who, like I said earlier on, the real capitalists, the one who own the wealth. You see? Now, back to the issue of democracy and crowds. The truth is, in a society where there exists steep inequality in terms of wealth and power and education, democracy is nothing but a tool for the continual dominance of the oligarchs, the money people, or the highly educated. Why? Because if there are poor people in society, it is easy for them to be influenced by the use of money, just as in our case here in Nigeria. So that while most of the citizens, especially those in the middle classes, are in opposition of the state and whatever they try to do, the state formation of the capitalists who own the power, who control the place, the lower classes, who are generally more populated, can be used to overwhelm them. The middle classes are those who at least they have a job that takes care of them, that feeds them, that they have a stable income, monthly they get money to take care of their family, to feed their kids, send them to school, and they comfortable to a small extent. They are not always plenty. The lower class are the people that are plenty. The poor, the very poor people who are not having stable finances, who don't have any form of security in life. They are the lower classes, and these are the people that are most susceptible to being controlled with money, because for them, they don't have anything to lose. Whether they accept to do what the elites bid them to do or not, they still don't gain anything. They are poor, so at least they take the money to see. They say a bird in hand is worth two in the bush. So they see the money that is there. They don't really trust the promises of the other guy who comes as though he has good intentions. They don't know, they don't care. They have already resigned to their fate. So at least they take the money, they take the 2 cups of rice, they take the 2-3 cubes of Maggi, and they do what the elites want, and they go their different ways. And this explains the political power held by the northern people of this nation, because in their case they are a lot more populated, but the twist is that the issue of poverty and illiteracy is a lot more predominant in the northern part of our nation, and which makes it easy for the people to be controlled. All right. The issue is clear here. A poor man doesn't have any other problem apart from his hunger, and a hungry man will first of all try to satiate his hunger before you can start telling him about reason and common sense. You see, so the people of the north, they have a lot of almajiri, street children, men and women who don't have any property, who don't have any wealth, who don't have any security, no skill, no nothing. And these ones know that, be it as it may, the society does not favor them. The political system does not favor them. So whenever they are called for, they come, they vote, they collect their 1,000 naira or 2,000 naira or 5,000 naira, and they go their way, because they know that is all they can get. They cannot be employed, they cannot engage in businesses because they don't have the capital. So, what the hell? Why not? And it's the case in the north. They bring in people from God knows where to come and vote for elections, and they win elections. Even though every other person, like the south, who are a lot more exposed and a lot more educated and a bit more comfortable when it comes to finances, if you compare the poverty level in the south and poverty level in the north, you find out the poverty level in the north at way starts in the south. Even though the people in the south are mostly trying to be rational, trying to be realistic, let's do this, let's check the leader and see what they are able to do and stuff. The people in the north don't care about all those things. In fact, they even hardly hear the English language you're speaking. They don't even understand what you're talking about. So it's easy for them to be controlled. And their elites have mastered that particular level of control. You don't build schools, apart from their Muslim schools. You don't build any form of trade or skill acquisition center, because they know that so long as you keep the people ignorant and poor, you always have control over them. It doesn't matter if they like you or they hate you. The fact is, so long as they are hungry, they are ignorant, they will always do what you want them to do, because they have to feed their families as well. And then you tell me that democracy is a cool form of government. It is not a cool form of government. Because think about this. The level of inequality is too much in our society. The poor, the very, very poor, outweigh the very, very poor and the very, very illiterate, outweigh to a large extent the people who even have the ability to take care of themselves for a certain period of time, and the people who have ability gone to secondary school or have a degree or a diploma in something. The ones who do not have this diploma, the ones who don't even have 5,000 naira in their account, or who don't even have an account to start with, outweigh them in population. And that is what the political elites, they always bank on, that during election periods they can always govern, they can always mobilize these people and win the elections. So think about it. Does it make everybody equal? No. But that's what democracy wants you to believe in, right? You have 3 university graduates, and then you have 7 illiterates, who are voters in an election between 2 persons. One person is a nice guy, has good ambitions, has good hopes for the nation. He's trying to build the place better, but naturally, he doesn't have the capacity, he doesn't have the capital required to do these things. He doesn't have the power, when it comes to wealth. Then there's the other guy who has the wealth, but doesn't have any other virtue apart from the fact that he has money. And because of this lack of virtues, all he wants is more money, to compensate for his lack of any other thing, his lack of every other thing. So he uses money. You can't influence the 3 guys easily that have a degree, that have been taught how to reason out things, being analytic in their reasoning. They have developed their reasoning abilities. They are conscious of their environment. They know the reality of the day. You cannot go and use 10,000 naira and coax them. They probably have millions in their account already, or a few 100,000 in their accounts. But the other ones who don't even have an account to start with, they live from hand to mouth every day. You know that you have them in your pocket. And you know that those 7 will always win the other 3, even though the other 3 will naturally have the best decisions if they had the ability to do this. But democracy robs the best in our society from doing what they can for the people, because the elite who control the power use that finance, that wealth to rule over every other person. So the first thing is that our state is not just about the people. It's about the people that have money, that have power. They make up the state, and the state determines the nature of the government, and the government decides the policies to pursue, the laws to enforce, and things like that. And if the government decides the law which rules over every other person, both the small and the great, and the government which decides the law is influenced by the state, what then is the role of the citizen? Because first of all, the citizens do not even have any say, because by the use of hunger, poverty and illiteracy, they are always fooled into making the wrong decisions in elections. Alright? So they will always make the wrong decisions in elections. They will always choose the wrong governments because of the influence of the state. So, what does that leave us? They say the common good. I said you should remember this word common good because I used it to describe what we call the law, what we call the constitution. But let me ask you a question. When has it ever occurred in this world that the common good of the poor and the weak becomes the same thing, becomes the same good for the rich and the mighty and the powerful? No, the common good for the poor is never the common good for the rich and powerful. In fact, what the poor people want is directly opposite of what the rich people want. It is the truth in society. So what is the law? What is the law, therefore? The rule of law, therefore, is the pronouncement of the common good of the wealthy in a bid to cope and control the life of the not wealthy and not powerful. So democracy is a hoax. It's a very big scam. It makes sense when you think about it theoretically. Yeah, the people vote for their leaders and the government of the people, blah 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 blah. It makes sense if all the people are equal, if there is equality, when it comes to education, when it comes to wealth, when it comes to power, there is equality, or at least there's something that looks like an equality. Not in a society where there is a steep difference. There's a big difference between those who have and those who have not. Those who know and those who do not. And those who have not and those who do not, they outweigh those who have and those who and those who know. And thereby they are susceptible to being used, to being controlled. That's why you find Nigerian youths go into polling units to rig elections, to hijack ballot boxes, to intimidate voters, and things like that. Even though it is they, the youths themselves, who are the worst treated by the government, who are worst treated by the state, they are the ones who themselves still go there to do whatever they ask them to do, because in the first place, they do not have. They want to have, because it's a capitalist system, right? I mean, we have the worst things in this world. We have the capitalist system. The founding fathers of Nigeria, they saw the inequality and said, okay, let's have a mixed economic system. Let's have capitalists do their own thing a little, and let's have the government protecting the people in the form of socialism. That's why you find out the government in Nigeria, they give you things like lights and water and other small things like that. The government tries to do that for you. But in the real sense, we are a capitalist system, because whatever the government has to do is always influenced by the state, who are those who have the capital, who are the capitalists. The capitalists influence the state, thereby making sure that everything that the state is involved in fails. That's why we have epileptic power supply. That's why we have places that don't even know that it's possible for the government to supply them with water every moment of the day. There are places that people don't even imagine there are things that government is supposed to be doing for them. In an economic system, there are things the government is supposed to be providing for you free of charge, or at least for a very small charge. But since we have capitalists who make up the state, who make up the authority in our society, and use this their power, this their money power, to influence the government, the people are left there like abandoned children by the roadside. You see, we have the worst. We have capitalism in a nation where poverty is the order of the day, and we have capitalism. Where exactly do you want people to get capitals to involve in economic activities? Well, that is where we have capitalism. That's why the poverty is very, very high, because the government thinks, okay, people have the freedom to engage in their own enterprises. You can start your business, you can do this, but then in reality, you need money to start business, and you cannot create money. You cannot go and invent your own money. You cannot build money. Money has to flow from the hands of the person who has it to the hands of the person who needs it. And mostly, the people who have money in Nigeria are people who are linked to the states behind the problems of our country. In one way or the other, they are linked to the states. They are linked to the problems. So they cannot go around giving their money out to anybody just like that. Because the more money they give out, the more independent the people become, and they begin losing their power. So democracy in Africa is a big lie. It's a big lie. What we have as democracy in Africa is a big lie, because the people are unable to make decisions for themselves. It's like telling children to run the house when you know that they are children, they are ignorant, they are weak, they are powerless, and you ask them to take care of the house. Maybe you travel out and you leave your 10-year-old and your 5-year-old and your 6-year-old to run their house. That is what democracy is in Nigeria. Alright? Because we need money to run the system, we need money to live life, we need money to do everything we need to do. And people don't have this money. And especially now, where inflation is taking away the small money you had. At least before you had $1 million in your bank account, you know that, okay, at least you are a guy man. You can manage yourself. But right now, $1 million in your account is nothing. $10 million in your account is nothing. So you see, it's the people that have the plenty money that are benefiting, even during inflation. Why? Because the small money in your hand, you're using it to buy goods and services, which are controlled by monopolies. Monopolies control the economy of Nigeria, whether you like it or not. Most of the goods you buy, whether they have different names, they all come from the same companies, owned by the same set of persons. That is monopoly. Just because it's called Omo, then the other one is called Clean, doesn't mean that every sachet of Clean and Omo you buy goes to the wallet of one person. Just because it's called Techno and it's called Infinix doesn't mean whenever you buy those things, you don't make one person wealthy. Just because it's First Bank or Access Bank or whatever bank, it doesn't mean that whenever you do bank with those people, you don't make one person rich. It's a monopoly. And because of this monopoly, even you who is trying to go into business as a small CEO, as a small entrepreneur, you are choked until you close up shop and go back to your house. Because you cannot compete with monopolies, right? They have all the resources. So the small money you have in your hand, try to use it to survive, which at the end of the day ends up in the hands of those who have. So the rich get richer, the poor, hope on God. No, I'm not trying to discredit democracy. No. What I'm doing here is trying to call a spade a spade. In Africa, as we have it currently, democracy is a joke. We have never even had democracy in Africa. Like I said earlier on, when it came to the selection of leaders in African traditional systems, in villages and towns in Africa of those days, the people did not vote. It was the oligarchs of the society that came together to decide who becomes king or who becomes chief. The people only wake up one morning and the town crier is going about shouting, "Oh, we have made Nduka king. Nduka is the new king. Nduka is the new king. Nduka is the new chief." And everybody is like, "Oh, the gods have chosen Nduka." But we know the gods are human beings. Alright? It is the elite chiefs, the big chiefs, and the juju priests that come together and say, "Okay, let's choose this person." And that is how the system was in Africa. Because they understood. And most times it worked. It worked well. Alright? It worked very well. Because then they chose people who were directly responsible for the place. That's why they say, okay, ancestry, your blood, your lineage, your bloodline. They choose people who cannot lead that place, where people whose families are, integral to that society, who cannot live there. So at least these ones have the mind to say, okay, well, if I spoil this place, I must spoil my property. If I develop it, I'm developing my property. And it worked for the African people. Because they knew that everybody in the society is not the same. We have people who are drunkards, who are idiots, who are degenerates, people who are ignorant, people who are ill with ill intentions, people who are bad. They didn't just come together and say, okay, everybody's equal, everybody can come and choose who they want. But this so-called civilization brought the idea of democracy. And see where we are today. We don't even know where we are in the first place. That is a big joke. We don't know where we are. Because even if we know, if we are listening where we are, we can say, okay, from here we can move to this direction. But the truth is, we don't know where we are. And that is why it is important that our message spreads across every corner of our nation. We are being played. Even the guys who own the money in this land, they also have to pay loyalties to foreign entities from whom their money comes from. It's the truth. Oh, you think because Tony Elumelu is a billionaire in Nigeria, you think he has total control of his wealth? No. He owns, is it, what bank does Tony Elumelu control? Is it Access? Or, I don't know. These banks also have insurance with other foreign entities whose money Tony Elumelu depends on. And this goes to show you that those foreign bodies control local billionaires, local big boys that you have here. And Nigeria is a nation that is run with crude oil money. Crude oil, and we do not refine crude oil. We do not sell crude oil products. We just sell off the raw material and then buy the refined product, which is a fool's play, right? It puts us in 100% total dependence on external entities. And we are a people. We are a sovereign nation. Why are we dependent on others for our life? Which is what we are doing. We are a sovereign country that depends on others for our living, for our livelihood. In reality, that's what we are doing. We are like that 60-year-old man that depends on his father, who is 80 years old, for his daily. It doesn't make any sense. Okay, that's why we are in so much debt, because we do not do anything for ourselves. We just depend on people's wealth, and these people control everything. If these people say don't breathe anymore, you won't breathe. Let me tell you something. You say you are a citizen here in Nigeria, you have rights and this. If those people say don't breathe again, you will not breathe. And that's the reality. A capitalist economy, conclusively, a capitalist economy is run with capital. And in our society, very few people have capital. Which means the ones who have capital control over the people who have no capital. And the ones who have capital are not usually the best people. We know very well that the people who have the most money are not usually the best kind of people. They are always the worst kind of people. The very wealthy people are always the worst kind of people you meet. Even though in the public they try to be nice and decent and civilized, but if you meet them in their private environment, you might puke at the level of indecency that they operate on. And that's the reality. Imagine the level of hunger and starvation in our country, but we have billionaires. Does anyone come out to say, okay, let's try to pull finances together and see how we can rescue the economy of our nation and save people from hunger and starvation? Nobody has done that. Nobody is doing that. Nobody cares about that, because, well, the more poor, the more impoverished become, the richer the rich people become. Alright? Before you were buying salt, a packet of salt for 50 naira. Now you're buying a packet of salt for 200 naira. Whether you buy 50 naira, 200 naira, Dangote is cashing out. That's the reality. So now tell me, this democracy, is it the best choice for us? It is not. It can be, but we have not reached a level yet. Democracy can be useful for us. That's why we have created the Zion movement. So we enlighten our fellow citizens about the reality of the day. So at the end of the day, we can decide to say, okay, we want democracy to continue or we want it to end. And by ending democracy, we find an alternate means of governing ourselves. We are a sovereign, independent people. We should not be doing things because other people are doing it. It's the wrong way of living your life. You cannot be doing things because it doesn't mean what you're doing is not just. That's what they tell you in Nigeria. They are doing it in the United States. Let me tell you, see, the history of the US is different from the history of Nigeria. Nigeria is made up of people, ancestral people who own the land that they walk upon. The Igbos own the Igbo land. The Yorubas own the Yoruba land. The Efiks and the Jagan people, which I am a part of, we own our land. Alright? Even if you travel from your part of the country to another part of the country, you know that where you are from, there's a family land, a family wealth, family property that is there, with your name on it. Maybe unless you were born in this generation where, profligacy and due to, a non-examined life, people now live without having any form of wealth or security. But in reality, every child born in Africa has his name on one wealth or the other, whether it's a bush, whether it's a house or something. There's a family wealth there. That's what we are. But the US are not us. The US are people that came from different places to colonize the place. So in the first place, we're not the same kind of people. They are colonizers. We are landlords. We are people who own our land. So our political system can never ever be the same, because the mentality that they have over their land, over their country, is not the same that we have over our place. So we can just say, hey, we are doing this because America is doing it. Go to hell with America. What is good for Nigeria? What is good for Nigerians? That is a question we are supposed to be asking ourselves. And that's the question that we are asking in the Zion movement. What is good for Nigeria? What is good for ourselves in the long run? Thank you very much. please share this message